Welcome back to the podcast where we dive deep into the human errors that changed everything. Today we set sail of one of the most shocking maritime disasters of the 21st century. A story of luxury, bravado, and one very, very bad decision. Today we're talking about the tale of the Costa Concordia. I'm Eckhard Jan, and this is Era 1. On the 13th January 2012, the cruise ship Costa Concordia ran aground on a rock off the coast of the Italian island of Giglio. The hull below the waterline was torn open over a length of 55 yards. Water seeped in and the ship capsized. There were fatalities among both passengers and crew members. A total of 32 people lost their lives. The ship was a total loss and had to be scrapped. But what had happened? What led to this disaster? Let's take another look at the error chain again. Costa Concordia is an Italian cruise shipping company from Genoa. It was founded 1854, but is now part of the Carnival Corporation from Miami. The Carnival Group comprises 9 different cruise brands and operates a total fleet of 91 ships. This makes Carnival the world's largest cruise company, and the world also includes well-known names such as Cunard Lines and others. A somewhat convoluted conglomerate with different responsibilities. But let's get back to today's story, the ship Costa Concordia. She was a beauty. Built in Italy, the pride of Fincantieri shipyards in Sestri Ponente near Genoa. A floating palace, 290 meters long, which equals 952 feet, 114,000 tons gross weight, and 13 decks of luxury. She carried up to 3,780 passengers and over 1,000 crew members. She had theaters, restaurants, spas, swimming pools, and even a giant faux Roman spa with marble statues. Everything about her screamed La Dolce Vita. Imagine a Vegas restaurant glued to a cruise ship, and you're getting close. It was built for an impressive 450 million euros and was the first and largest of the Concordia class. The Carnival Corporation built several ships of this Concordia class. At the time, it was not only the largest ship of the Costa Concordia shipping company, but also the largest cruise ship in Italy. Launched in 2006, the Costa Concordia was a dream. Her name Concordia, symbolizing harmony and unity amongst nations. Oh, what an irony. But on January 13, 2012, the dream turned into a nightmare. On the evening of this fateful day, which incidentally was Friday the 13th, the Costa Concordia had just set out from Civitavecchia. On board, over 4,200 souls, tourists from across Europe, families, honeymooners, retirees chasing the sun. It was on a 7-day Mediterranean cruise and sailed from Savona via Toulon, Barcelona and Mallorca onto Palermo. The last port, Civitavecchia, is just a port north of Rome. It was the last evening when it left and set course for its final destination, Savona. The passengers enjoyed the last evening of their cruise. But there was something different about this voyage. Captain Francesco Schettino, tanned, confident, and a man with taste for flair, had a surprise in store. He wanted to impress not just the passengers, but a friend, a certain Moldovan dancer who just happened to be on the bridge with him that night. But we'll come back to her later. As a grand finale, Schettino decided to perform an unplanned salute, a maritime flyby, sailing dangerously close to the rocky shores of Giglio Island, a picturesque dot in the Tyrrhenian Sea. In Italy, this practice is known as inchino, which translates as bowing. The idea? Blast the horn, let the islanders wave, and glide past in a display of nautical bravado. This spectacular maneuver is considered one of the highlights of Mediterranean cruises. In order to entertain guests in the highly competitive cruise market, the salute is performed from time to time. It is at the discretion of the respective captain, as it depends on many different conditions and variables. To do this, the ship deviates from the planned route and heads toward a coastal town. Passengers are also treated to a fantastic view as the ship passes close to an illuminated town in the dark. In 2011, Costa ships carried out this ingenious procedure, the salute, of Giglio Island several times. The mayor of the island was always thankful for these passages. The Costa Concordia has also passed the island of Giglio on previous voyages. Only this salute tonight went horribly wrong. Some family members of Costa Concordia's crew were living on Giglio and awaited the passage with enthusiasm. The sister of one head waiter had already announced on social media that the ship would soon be passing by, very close. At 9:30, the captain entered the bridge and took command. He instructed the helmsman to switch off the autopilot and steer the ship manually. He also ordered the ship to sail even further west, closer to the island, and increase its speed to 60 knots. This was only 5 knots below the ship's maximum speed. Schettino's reasoning: the ship had to approach the coast directly. An officer later testified,
"The captain wanted to approach so close to take a bow. In other words, he wanted to greet Captain Palombo, who lives on Giglio, from as close as possible."
This was a retired captain and Schettino's former mentor. The new course for such a passage must be planned and plotted. According to international regulations, precise navigation charts are required for such a maneuver. However, the charts were not on board, as was later discovered. A planned route change must also be announced to headquarters before the ship set sail. None of this was the case on the fateful January 13th. The deviation course of the vessel must be plotted in such a way that a safe minimum distance to the island is always guaranteed. This is to prevent the ship from running aground in shallow waters or due to rocks and reefs near the coast. At 20:10, Schettino began to give a series of instructions. First, the ship was to turn away from the island and then continue parallel. He wanted to prevent the stern from hitting the rocks, which each change of course, however, the ship moved sideways, getting closer to the rocks. The speed was also way too high for such a tight turn. In addition, the easterly wind was pushing the ship further towards the coast. The captain instructed the second helmsman to monitor the port side, which is the left side of the ship. He was obviously aware that it was getting pretty tight. Normally, the specified safety distance from the coast was to be at least half a nautical mile, which is approximately 1,000 yards. The route was to run parallel to the coast. However, the Costa Concordia came within 100 yards, not 1,000, 100 yards, and struck a submerged rock with a charted depth of 24 feet. The ship's draught was only 26 feet, so it was already 2 feet too deep for these waters. A massive gash, over 55 yards long, ripped through the port side of the hull. The water flooded the engine rooms. It wasn't long before the power generators failed. The auxiliary generator for such emergencies did not start either. Many of the 3,200 passengers on board were still having dinner when the ship ran aground. Passengers felt a violent shudder, plates shattered, and people screamed. The ship moved even further north. Within a minute, it became dark on board the Costa Concordia. Lights went out. The ship lost power. Initially, they were only informed that there was a problem with the power supply. "We have a blackout. Please remain calm." Spoiler alert, it was not just a blackout. Passengers who quickly assembled on deck with their life jackets were asked to return to their cabins. Another fatal mistake, as it later turned out. Passengers waited for instructions that never came. Meanwhile, water kept rushing in. And what did Captain Schettino? He hesitated. He fumbled. Schettino only reported a power failure to the Coast Guard. The ship was therefore unseaworthy. He deliberately concealed the collision. He delayed the Mayday call for more than 1 hour. Instead of alerting the Coast Guard and giving the order for an evacuation, he made an agitated phone call to a supervisor on duty at the Costa Shipping Company. Even when the ship was clearly leaning to one side, Schettino had made no attempt to evacuate the ship. It was not until 10:30 that the first distress call was made. The evacuation was forced to begin. At 11:30, the first passengers were taken to lifeboats. It was far too late as the ship was already leaning so much that it was no longer possible to lower lifeboats on one side. What followed was chaos. No clear orders, no timely evacuation. Lifeboats were jammed and crew members were confused. And then, in what would become a symbol of cowardice, he abandoned the ship. Yes, the captain left the sinking ship. He later explained that he accidentally fell into the lifeboat and then decided to continue coordinating the evacuation from the mainland. When he was already in the lifeboat, he even phoned the commander of the port of Giglio. The commander clearly requested Schettino several times to return to the ship in order to coordinate the evacuation. You can hear the port commander's anger and desperation.
Lei ha dichiarato l'abbandono nave. Adesso comando io. Lei vada a bordo. È chiaro? Comandante. Non mi sente? Sto andando a bordo.
The Coast Guard commander famously barked at him over the radio, "Get back on board, damn it!" But he didn't. In total, 32 people died, including a 5-year-old girl, elderly passengers, and several crew members. Many drowned, some were crushed, one died weeks later in a hospital. The Costa Concordia lay wounded on her side, just off the coast, half submerged like a fallen titan. The image was unforgettable. This enormous luxury liner tilted, broken and humiliated within sight of the shore. So, who was this Captain Francesco Schettino? 10 years earlier, Schettino was hired by Costa Crociere at the age of 41. In 2006, he was promoted to captain and given the honor of commanding the newly launched Costa Concordia. This went well for a long time, until around 2010. 2 years before the accident of Giglio, Schettino had already caused another shipping accident. In 2010, as captain of the Costa Atlantica, he damaged another Carnival Corporation ship when he entered the port of Warnemünde at a speed which was too high. Here too, he was at the helm when the collision occurred. His hasty escape from the sinking Costa Concordia had earned Schettino the nickname Captain Coward. The fact that the captain is the first to leave the ship is beyond any rules or customs, because it was always said the captain is the last to leave the ship. His behavior was described as headless or panicky. You would be more likely to suspect this of a drunk driver fleeing the scene of an accident to avoid a breathalyzer check. Later, it became known that he had dinner with his pretty friend in a restaurant that evening. The two of them had drank considerable amounts of wine. Let's look at history. Do we learn from past mistakes? Has there ever been a collision of a large passenger ship due to misjudgment, not to say overconfidence, on part of the captain? Almost exactly 100 years ago, on April 15th, 1912, the Titanic sank. I find it astonishing that such mistakes still occur today. But perhaps it is also because we as humans will never be error-free. Some of these wrong decisions end in catastrophe and tragedy. So, what was the error one? The captain was obviously distracted at the time of the accident. On the one hand, he was on the phone with his mentor, the retired captain who spent his retirement in Giglio. On the other hand, he was still talking to several people on the bridge, including the dancer Domenica Cemortan, with whom he had already dinner earlier. Dominika Chermortan was a crew member on the Costa Concordia for several years. She was born in Moldova and trained later on as a ballet dancer in Bucharest and Paris. On the cruise ship, she worked as a hostess and as a translator for Russian passengers. Chermortan and Schettino had therefore known each other for some time. She came on board on Friday morning, less than 12 hours before the accident happened. She did not need a ticket. When questioned later, she said, "If you are the captain's mistress, they don't ask for a ticket." Schettino took her suitcase directly to his cabin. Schettino had an affair. He was 51 and was married and had a 15-year-old daughter at home. His lover Chermortan was 25. Was Schettino trying to impress her and therefore risk the daring maneuver? Schettino had taken his lover onto the bridge especially for the romantic island passage. "I'm devastated just because I wanted to do this woman a favor," he told the shipping company on the phone a few minutes after the accident. And the aftermath? As for the ship, the Costa Concordia had been in service for less than 6 years when it capsized near Giglio. Salvaging her was one of the most complex and expensive maritime operations ever, over $1 billion. Engineers spent 2.5 years power-buckling the wreck, stabilizing it, and finally towing it to Genoa for scrapping. A sad end for a ship that was once a symbol of elegance, brought down by a cocktail of ego, negligence, and catastrophic delay. You might wonder what had happened to the captain. There were massive lawsuits and investigations. Captain Schettino was charged with manslaughter, causing shipwreck, and abandoning ship. His defense? He fell into a lifeboat, but the judge didn't buy it. On February 11, 2015, almost exactly 3 years after the accident, Schettino was sentenced to 16 years in prison for premature abandonment of the ship and 32 counts of involuntary manslaughter. His lover, Chermortan, later gave many interviews. She described many details of her affair in a book full of pictures and in great detail. Shortly after the accident, Italy's government signed a regulation to prevent such accidents. Since then, merchant and passenger ships above a certain size must keep a minimum distance of 2 nautical miles. The decree was described in the Italian press as the anti-bowing law. The Costa Concordia wasn't just a tragedy. It was a textbook case of human error. Not bad weather, not technical failure, but pride, showmanship, and poor leadership. And perhaps a misplaced desire to impress, when all people just really wanted to have a safe journey. And thank you for joining me on this episode of Error 1. If you like the show, leave a review, share it with a friend, or shout it from a lifeboat. Just make sure you're the last one to board. Until next time, stay safe, humble, and remember, disasters often begins with just wrong turn. If you want to learn more about aviation investigation, you can now enroll at our acclaimed training or just visit aviationinvestigation.com. With this in mind, I say thank you very much. As we say in Germany, bleiben Sie sicher, stay safe, and see you next time.